equipment and parts that we've amassed. And the question is, when we reach that point to where we become worm food, what happens to it? Well, you hear all these sad tales of this guy who had a big signal who crapped out. And it's like, well, where does gear go? Where did the equipment go that was responsible for that big signal? It went into the dumpster. And that's the sad thing, because the old vintage AM gear hasn't been made in years. It's not going to be remade. And for modern day ham radio that works on AM, we have SDR technology, both the Flex and the Anon. All the other stuff that alleges to function on AM sounds like crap. So that's my thrust of being on AM, is that you can make it sound good. There's quite a few people that are of the mindset that, oh, you mustn't touch it. It's like a vintage, untouched 57 Chevy. You can't yank that engine out and put in a much built up big block instead of the small block that was standard. You can't do this, you can't do that, because then it isn't. Well, what's the threshold of what it is and what it isn't? And then there's the mindset of, well, you gotta get in there and recap it. Well, if you're going to replace a capacitor, that's changing it. But you have to, because the gear is getting old, the condensers are getting leaky, the resistors are resisting too much and their values are going through the roof. So you have to replace components, but you have to look at the overall circuit design and ask yourself, what is a better way to go? And there's all kinds of opinions out there, mine included, as far as how to make it better. But for instance, with capacitors, well, when they're used for audio coupling, you'll look at the value of the grid resistor that it looks into. Replace them with capacitors that will greatly improve the low-end response, but not ridiculously to the point that the audio section goes into motor boating oscillation. You know, that kind of thing. Receivers too. It's amazing what you can do with old stuff and make it sound good. That to me is half the fun, besides getting on and just meeting up with other people that like to do the same thing, and connecting with just people in general who like to conversate. And in the time period that I've been into ham radio, which this coming February, it will have been 50 years. And that, my friend, is a long time, and a number of us here are on that 50-year cusp, or they just passed it. And there's a lot of changes that have happened as far as the AM thing. Now, what I'm going to do is ask for people to talk about their experiences when they first got on, what it was like then, and how they feel it is now. What are their thoughts? So think about it, and then when I open up that segment, come on up. I'm looking around and I know a number of people that have been around that long time. What was it like when you first fired up and got on the air? What kind of thoughts were going through your mind? Oh, another nightly adventure? I don't have to go to school until tomorrow. Screw homework. I'll just pretend I've done it. I'll tune around. Oh, there's Bob. And there's John. And there's Bill. Call them in, get on the radio, and you hang out with your buds. And then, Joey, it's time to go to bed. It's a school night. So therein begins another cycle till the next night, where you pick up where you left off. Then as we move on into the working world, married with children, the time for ham radio seems to evaporate. Either that, or it just goes into remission or put on hold until the youngins have grown up and left the nest. Then you pick it up again. After a 20-some-odd, 30-year absence, surprised to find maybe that, yeah, that good old gear that you used to use back in the 60s and 70s is still around. The other thing is the value of it. And those that are into peddling their stuff are now finding that the value has dropped off unless you eBay it. And then again, you take a heavy transmitter or a heavy receiver and you want to peddle it on eBay, and somebody decides they're going to pay you a good buck for it, how are you going to get it to them? You know, the costs of shipping, insuring, and making sure that it gets there in one piece, that's a challenge too. The other thing is, when we're all gone, who is going to be into the gear? Look at what's going on in ham radio. Look at us. We're all at least in our 40s, 50s, 60s, maybe some into our 70s. What about the new blood? I've seen a little bit of new blood, but it's a fraction of what it should be. So it's, how are we going to promote our aspect of amateur radio, the real amateur radio, the real equipment that either glows in the dark or the solid state stuff that's built by hand that makes broadcast quality audio with great efficiency, and it's got life to it. So that's, I think, where we're at. That's where we're at.